Hello, everybody! So today I am not only joined by a fellow ADHD creator with thousands of followers across his platforms, but also a small business owner and successful ADHD stim toy designer. You've probably heard me talk about Stimagz before because I genuinely love them so much and I never ever put them down. And I can thank Kody for that new obsession. So Kody and I were introduced earlier this year, and just last month we actually finally met in person. So without further ado, here's my buddy old pal and the business extraordinaire, Kody Lukens. Hello.
What an intro. Hello, Hayley. How are
Right?
you today?
I'm doing well. Excited to chat. And yeah, it's just nice to have you on here, because if people don't know that are listening to this, you and I are quite close friends now, and we talk quite frequently.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I actually did add you to my favorites on the phone app yesterday. Hayley called me out of the blue, and I mentioned that I don't think I had updated my favorites since middle school. So there were some people in there that would not probably even recognize my name if I called them.
Yeah, and Kody is on my favorites now because I'm like, only a couple people that I call frequently, and now Kody is one of them. So congrats, you've joined that list. Welcome to the Busy Bee with ADHD podcast, a podcast about tools and strategies for ADHD, all while laughing at my very dumb but plump ass, Hayley Honeyman. I'm an ADHD coach and influencer with the goal of helping my fellow ADHD pals. Let's get into it. So I wanted to spend some time today kind of talking about this link between ADHD and entrepreneurship, because as both of us are business owners now, as well as having ADHD, I think it's kind of an interesting conversation, because I quite frequently hear from clients or people that I know that have ADHD that their goal one day is to work for themselves. They desperately want to be a business owner, and they see people like us doing it, but have no idea where to start or how to get into it. So how did you get into business? Like, where did this journey kind of start for you?
Well, the journey started way back when. When I was probably around 15, my dad told me to get a job. And I was sort of interested in video production at the time. I made fun little videos with my friends. And I realized, I was taking a class in high school at the time for that as well. And I realized during the class, I can probably make some money off of this. And so I told him, actually, I think I'm going to try to do some video production freelancing. And she said, okay, you can try that, but make sure you have a backup plan. So, if it doesn't work out, you can still have a job and make some summer money.
Yeah.
And this is I would not recommend this necessarily, but one of my main motivators, at least when starting a new project, is spite. If someone tells me that I can't do something, I set out to prove them wrong, and I will work so much harder to do that than if it was just, this sounds like a fun little project. It's not something you can do long term. It's great to get me started on something, but if you just keep doing everything in your life out of spite or to prove someone wrong, you can quickly lose touch with yourself and your sort of inner motivations and desires. So wouldn't necessarily recommend that. That might not be my best first answer on entrepreneurship and on your podcast. Sorry about that. But
do it out of spite.
Do it out of spite. Start it out of spite. Continue it out of love and passion.
Oh, deeply. Yeah. I mean, I feel like that makes sense, though. Like, a lot of us have that feeling of like, if you don't think I can do it, I'm going to do it better than you ever expected. It's like kind of like a, a response mechanism almost to protecting ourselves, to be like, I'm gonna get ahead of this rejection that I'm gonna feel and just prove you wrong.
Also, because my dad will probably listen to this, I love you, Dad. You're wonderful and supportive. That was just an anecdote. I know that you've supported me every step along the way in video production. Thank you for that.
Shout out to Kody's dad.
Woohoo! Thanks, Andy.
Love that. I was looking through a couple different articles and things, and something that a lot of them noted were that a lot of our ADHD symptoms can be like directly linked to, benefits of being a business owner. So I wanted to see, how you connected to these, and like, let's imagine that the listener can also kind of do this. So if you're listening as well, think about if these make sense for you. One of the core ADHD traits is like this idea of like risk taking and the ability to just do like massive leaps of faith. Have you found that has been a part of your business journey?
Absolutely. I invested almost the entirety of my life savings into the start of Stimagz. If the Kickstarter didn't go well, I would have been pretty bankrupt. And even right now, me personally, I do not have much money at the moment because I've just continued to invest everything I have into Stimagz, more inventory, more ad spots, further refining the design, website refinements, that kind of thing. I wouldn't be where I am now had I not taken the risk and made the decision of, okay, like it sort of all or nothing. And it's unfortunate, but it's sort of something you have to do to an extent. Not necessarily investing your entire life savings, but you have to be willing to, you get out of it what you put in. You have to be willing to lose in order to win.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like being in a business space, especially if you're making the leap from like a corporate job or the regular 9 to 5 to like being a business owner and doing that, it one doesn't happen overnight. Like it's not an easy, just like life is different now completely, but it does require a bit of like just letting go and being like, oh God, I just got to go and do it. And so, yeah, I mean, love that.
Right.
There's also the aspect of like problem solving abilities, right? Like being able to continually adjust and switch up as needed, because I feel like a big part of being a business owner is putting out fires when they like randomly show up, right? Like
doing
the things
well under
we can't
pressure.
accept. Yeah. So how have you found that like your problem solving abilities have benefited you with your business adventures?
So I definitely am someone that does very well under pressure. I would always study for tests last minute, and by last minute I mean probably the minute before the test. I would go through my flashcards, my notes, where I'd be like, okay, that's great, and then I would jot down the things that I knew I was going to forget on the margins right when the test started. I do that similar type of thing with my business, where, once again, wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but this is what's working for me. I will wait until something is, it's like, what's that motivator? It's like INCUP or something like that. I don't remember the full acronym.
That is us. Yeah.
Indeed. Essentially, urgency is one of the main motivators for the ADHD brain.
Right.
And so I oftentimes will wait for things to become urgent, either intentionally or unintentionally. And then that's when it becomes, okay, a bit of a fight or flight mode. I will dedicate myself to this, get it done, because then when it's done, it's like, okay, dopamine, love that. Yeah. Something else that's really nice with ADHD and owning a small business, or I guess I don't really know how to describe my job at this point, because I do the stuff with Stimagz where I'm involved in every aspect of the business, from marketing to fulfillment to manufacturing, everything. And then I also do all of the stuff on social media with like ADHD advocacy, all that stuff. I also now have a podcast. What else am I doing? We're now working on, I don't know if we can really talk about this in detail yet, but Hayley and I are working on planning a convention now. And I was talking with, I suppose, a colleague yesterday, and he mentioned, you know what I've realized about you? You're involved in a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I am, and that's very much by design. When I am not involved in a lot of stuff and my schedule isn't full, I get very bored. Yes. And when I get bored, I get depressed, and then I don't end up doing anything. So I'm significantly more productive with an insanely packed schedule. Even if I'm getting less done on each individual thing, it's much more consistent. And something that's nice about what it is I do, however I would describe my job title at this point, is if I don't feel like making a TikTok video in a day or something, I don't have to. There's 50 other things I could be working on for other little ventures or like hustles or whatever the hell you want to call them. I'm not a fan of grind culture or hustle culture or anything like that. But being involved in so many different projects, all of which can potentially have different revenue streams associated with them, it keeps things fresh for me, to where it's like, oh yeah, another one of I remember another part of the acronym. The N stands for novelty. Novelty is another large ADHD motivator.
Yeah.
And so keeping things novel, keeping things fresh and interesting, always working on something new, is one of the main things that drives me forwards. And I don't think I could do a corporate job, or even like I got tired of video production for this reason. If it felt like I was doing the same types of things over and over again, which I suppose I'm doing with social media posts. It's a similar format I'll do in most of my videos, but there's still a lot of room to mix things up for each individual one, keep it fresh and interesting.
Yeah, I always hear a lot of like neurotypical people saying that for them, their life, it's very important to have consistency, right? And to like know what to expect every single day. But I've found that with a lot of ADHDers and like hearing what you're saying, inconsistency is actually really important for us to be able to like explore all the chaos in our brain and just like run with it, you know?
The name of my podcast, funnily enough, is actually Consistently Inconsistent. So I do very much like having consistency in my life, but I like having a sort of consistent base level in my life where I know where I'm going to be sleeping every night. I know generally what I'm going to be eating every day. Because if I don't have that planned out in advance, I'm just not going to eat. Right. That's a whole nother topic, but I know you can relate to that. And then beyond that sort of foundational structure is where I like to have the inconsistency come from. So I lost my train of thought, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's also a balance of like autism and ADHD for both of us, right? Is that our autism like really craves routine and structure and knowing what's like predictable. But the ADHD is like, okay, but like the other things, we want to just be chaotic and like all over the place and be able to run with a million ideas. I mean, our convention idea came from us sitting down doing a body doubling session, and then out of nowhere was like, that'd be cool if we did that. And it's like, and hyper-focused.
And it's happening.
Yeah.
And then actually, we probably shouldn't go into too many details yet, but a couple weeks later, we've made a lot of progress, and we're going to be making a lot more right after this podcast. It is very exciting. My new obsession currently. Yeah,
me too. So it is really cool to be able to like use that side of ADHD where, you know, the average person might see it as a negative to want to be in all of these other places because that doesn't function well in like a corporate type job or world because it's just too stagnant. And so I think that's often why people who, you know, have ADHD consider the idea of like, well, what if I was my own boss, right? Like, what if I was able to just like make my own decisions? And so with that, with the idea of like being your own boss, right? How have you enjoyed that, and maybe what are some of the challenges that have popped up that you weren't expecting with being your own boss?
It has very high highs and very low lows. When you don't have anyone else telling you what to do and anyone else determining your structure, whether that's your structure for a day or a project or your entire company, it all has to come from within yourself. And if something isn't urgent, if something isn't novel, if you don't have those, I guess, suppose traditional ADHD motivators, it can be very difficult to hold yourself accountable. It's a lot easier for me now when I have meetings scheduled with people and I have timelines with my manufacturer and with customers that I have to adhere to. But when I was first getting started, taking the first step is the hardest part. Not just in business, but in life with ADHD. The most difficult part of any project will be getting started. And so as a result of that, if no one else is holding you accountable, it's so easy to rationalize why you should push this off to next week or to next month or next year. It's like, oh, once I have this sorted out, then I'll get started on this project. Or as soon as I have more funding available, I'll do this. But that's just not how it works. If you don't start, you'll never get to where you want to be, and then suddenly you'll look back and 10 years will have gone by and you haven't gotten anything you set out to achieve. And one of the hardest parts for me of getting started was overcoming that fear of failure and embarrassment, putting yourself out there and then having something not land, whether that's not landing by your own standards that you set, if you're a bit of a perfectionist like yours truly, and I think you are a bit as well, or whether it's actually just, you know, fully putting yourself out there and then bombing entirely in the eyes of the world. I made the mistake of, when I made my TikTok page, I clicked the add contacts button, and so all the first people who followed me were people from my contacts, the absolute last people I wanted to be following me. And I guess this is probably just some internalized ableism, but I was very self-conscious about posting ADHD and autism content at first, because that wasn't something I'd been very vocal about in my life. I'd only been diagnosed about a year and a half before. And so when I started posting about that, and the only people seeing it really were my close friends, or even just anyone in my contacts, I suppose, I felt pretty self-conscious about that, going to class and knowing that a bunch of those people, because I started doing this when I was still in school, right. But going to class and knowing that a bunch of those people had seen me be really vulnerable on TikTok, and that started to go away the more that I did it, just I guess through exposure therapy. But then when it really started to go away is when I had my first video do somewhat well. Like at first getting maybe 15 to 100 views per video, and then at one point a video got to maybe 5,000 views or 10,000 views or something, and had maybe 10 comments about like, oh, this is really cool, I relate to this, or thank you so much for this is really helpful. Once I started getting that external validation, that was what I needed to sort of, it was the catalyst for my internal validation, to where after that point I knew like, okay, what I'm doing has value to other people, it's adding value to their life, and therefore I don't need to care about what people in my life or people online think about it, because there's a point to what I'm doing. And ever since then, it's been a lot less of an issue. Occasionally, there's a video where I think, oh, okay, this is a little out there. Like, it's very personal, very vulnerable. But for the most part, it doesn't bother me nearly as much as it used to.
Yeah. So if there was some, like, I guarantee that there is somebody listening that has said to themselves, I want to be my own boss one day. Right. I want to own my own business. I want to do that. What is the first thing that they should do, or what is the piece of advice that you would give to that person that's just fearful to start?
So when whatever it is you're doing, you need to have passion. You need to be willing to here I go, I guess, going to that hustle grind set culture. You have to be willing to metaphorically bleed for your company, your product, whatever it is you're doing. The hours I was working leading up to the Stimagz Kickstarter were obscene. It was probably 80 plus hours a week for weeks leading up to it. Something that if I weren't incredibly passionate about the product, and I don't actually have it in my hand right now because I have the Ono roller. I love this thing because it's really quiet and I don't want to be just clicking the whole podcast.
Yeah.
But if I wasn't incredibly passionate about that, it wasn't something that I personally loved, I don't think I could have done that. I couldn't have survived the amount of work required to bring it from ideation and conception to actually becoming a real physical product that's being mass manufactured.
Right.
And so my advice would be, find something in your life that you want, or find a hole in your life and make something to fill that hole, to fill that need. And once you do that, it's just sort of, it's one step at a time. And each step will seem scarier than the last because it feels like, oh, okay, I'm closer to a point where if this doesn't work, it's all over. Like, it's that. Another really hard part is announcing it to the world for the first time. My heartbeat, I measured it. It was like 160 or something ridiculous when I posted my first video about Stimagz, because that was the first time I had talked about it publicly whatsoever. I had no idea whether or not people would be receptive to it. And there were a lot of people that were saying like, oh, this already exists, you didn't make anything here. And I wasn't prepared for that. And it's hard when you're talking about your baby and people aren't receptive to it. And obviously that, mentality has shifted since then. People are now like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing, this is dope. But you have to sort of, in a way, you have to be incredibly passionate about what you're doing, but also be mentally or emotionally detached enough from it that if someone doesn't like it, it doesn't destroy you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really, really good advice, because I think for the most part, I have heard a lot of ADHD, like, clients of mine that will say, I really want to be my own boss. And I'll say, like, what are you passionate about? What are you interested in? And they're like, well, I like this, and I like this, and I like this, and I could do business in any of those areas. And I'm like, no, you need to be, like, 100%, like, I am so passionate about this thing that I'm willing to fail, because...
And it can't just be something that you like, because if it's something that you just like, you won't like it anymore.
No.
And then you're just left with doing this thing that you previously enjoyed, but now is just consuming your life. It has to be something like, like, this is my singular focus, singular drive.
Okay, Kody, so... let's say that the person that is listening that wants to be their own boss has finally made that leap and done, like, the first step. now that they're their own boss, how do they hold themselves accountable and keep with it?
It's a very easy trap to fall into, to sort of look at all of the stuff you have to do. Whether it's like, okay, I have to reach out to this manufacturer, I have to design this prototype, I have to make my logo, I have to establish myself on social media, and just get completely overwhelmed and work for 10 to 15 minutes a day on each thing, not actually really getting anywhere. Something that I really like to do is setting aside 1 to 3 hours a day, just putting my phone off somewhere, completely out of my sphere of influence, and just picking one task per day and working on that. And what if I don't feel like it at the beginning when I'm starting, just sort of, I guess, depending on how much I don't feel like it. If I'm starting to code something and I just and it just looks like gibberish to me on the screen, then I'll probably stop. But if it's more along the lines of, oh, I wish I was playing a video game right now, then just sort of power through it and you'll get in the zone. If you put yourself in a situation where you don't have any other options, it's a lot easier to focus on one particular thing and kind of direct yourself in a particular direction. So try to remove as many potential distractions as you can. I think it was Peter Shankman. He said he wrote his book on like a 16-hour flight to Japan or something like that. He booked the flight specifically to write the book because it removed all potential distractions. Literally did not have the internet available to him.
That's crazy.
I know, right? I very much resonate with that, where I'll close all of my fun tabs from my browser. I'm not reading the Warhammer wiki right now, and work exclusively on one thing. And if I notice myself getting off task or distracted, there's a time and a place for that. But during that sort of set time where working on one task, that's not the time nor the place. And so just gently redirect myself back to that one thing. And so it can take some getting used to where at the end of the day, you'll think, oh, okay, I did this one really important thing that I've been needing to do, but I also didn't touch any of this other stuff. And so I feel like, oh, I could have done more today. It wasn't the best use of time. But throughout the course of a week, that's 5 big things that you've potentially made progress on, which is oftentimes a lot better than making a little bit of progress on, 5 or 10 smaller things. And of course, there's times in my day when I do that. I usually do that sort of general stuff in the morning, and then the afternoon is when I'll have that focused window. But just finding a system that works well for you and being willing to experiment with things is definitely critical to, I suppose, long-term success and holding yourself accountable.
I love that. I do a very, very similar thing to what you do. Like, I very much have a, I'll brain dump all of the things that I need to do that day. And it's like, what of these things would make today feel successful?
Yeah.
And then focus on those things and get them done and out of the way so that, if the other tasks that I didn't get to weren't done, it's like, well, I said to myself, I did these, I feel successful. So I absolutely follow that. And I think that that's a really, really good piece of advice as people kind of start moving in that direction. Oh, that's
Indeed.
So cool.
And I know that if I was listening to this, I would get bothered if we didn't say what the acronym INCUP, all of the things are. So I looked it up. It is interest, novelty, challenge, urgency, and passion. And I feel like that is just very much accurate to my life as well as the lives of most ADHD people I know, not necessarily specifically the ADHD entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that that's really cool. And for the listeners, I will add that into the a link in like the bio so that people can look into that further afterwards. As we kind of wrap things up now, Kody, I want to give you an opportunity to shout yourself out, tell people where to find you, what you're working on, what they can be excited about that you've got going on right now.
Oh my goodness, okay. So I am on all social platforms at Kody Lukens. That is KODYLUKENS, all one word. My magnetic stim toy, Stimagz, is currently, I don't know when you're airing this, but they're currently not available just because we're manufacturing a ton of them for all the pre-sales that we did a couple months ago. But likely in mid-January is when they'll be available again. I also have a podcast, Consistently Inconsistent, which Hayley and I are actually about to record. So she'll be a guest on there. I don't know whether or not that'll be posted when she posts hers, but I guess we'll find out. We'll try to coordinate on that. And I think those are the main things, I guess. It's my first time being on a podcast. I hope I did all right.
You killed it, and I'm sure
Why,
everyone
thank
listening
you.
agrees. So thank you so much for being on. And yeah, for anyone that is looking for Kody's links, I will have those in the bio as well. And if you are a person that is interested in business and you have ADHD, I would absolutely recommend listening to the episode we're doing on Kody's podcast, because we're going to talk more about that, and I guess about my journey a little bit as well in that area. So head on over there, which I will also link in the bio. But for now, we bid you adieu. Goodbye.
Adios. Thanks for having me.